Hey guys, I am back with another Lightroom tutorial, and today I'm going to be showing you my thought process and my editing process in getting through edits for this photo. So as you can see, this photo was taken in the afternoon and the sun had just slipped behind a cloud, causing this image to have a very blue cast over it. So I'm going to be showing you how to bring back color to an image that looks kind of dull or is a bit dark or doesn't have many colors in it. So I'm going to jump straight into editing. The first thing that I'm noticing is this blue cast, as I mentioned. So we're going to jump over to our temperature and just drag it up until we're happy with what it looks like. I think just about there is good. So when we bring up our temperature, I am now noticing that there is a very small kind of green cast over the image. So I'm going to go over to our tint and bring that up just a little bit as well to get rid of that. And there we go. So next thing I'm seeing is that the image is just a little bit underexposed for my liking. So I'm going to head over to exposure. And instead of dragging it up with my mouse, I'm actually going to hover my mouse over here. So this is selected. And I'm going to use my up arrow just to bring it up by a few points. I find that Lightroom is very touchy when you're doing things with your mouse. So if I want to do very fine and minimal editing, this is the technique I use so I don't go overboard. So I think just about there looks really good. Next, I want to bring up the shadows to bring back a little bit more detail here in the background and around our model's face. So I'm going to bring up the shadows here, just about there. And every time I bring up the shadows, I like to bring the blacks down just to add a little bit more contrast to the image. I'm also going to bring the highlights down a little bit. There are a few spots in the photo that are very bright, such as her shoulder here and the water here. So I'll bring that down slightly. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to move ahead to my tone curve where I want to add a simple S curve. And I like to use a tone curve to add a little bit of a film-like effect to the image, as that is very much my style of editing and I love the way it looks. So in order to do that, I'm going to be dragging the blacks here up. So I just drag it across the box of the tone curve. And I also do the same with the highlights, so I crush the highlights a little bit. And then I turn it into an S by bringing the shadows down and then the midtones up. There we go. Now that we've changed the tone curve a little bit, I'm actually going to go back up to our tint and temperature. I've noticed that it started looking a little bit cooler again and a little bit green. So using the technique of hovering my mouse and using the arrow keys, I'm going to bring up the temperature by a few points, and same with the tint. There we go, that looks a lot better in my opinion. So the image is still looking a little bit dull for my liking, so I'm going to start by bringing up the vibrance. I like to bring up the vibrance in an image first, as it doesn't affect skin tones as much as saturation does. So I bring the vibrance up as high as I want it. And then if I still need a little bit more, I very lightly bring up the saturation, because you can very quickly alter someone's skin tone, which is something we definitely do not want, as it looks very, very fake. I think just about there is good because it's vibrant enough and it's not affecting our model's skin tone, which is great. So coming down, I want to bring up the sharpening in my photo a little bit. So I'll bring up the amount and then the radius. And then we're going to play around with the split toning a little bit. And I feel like split toning is what really gives your photo some personality. And what I like to do, I always start with the shadows and I bring up the saturation to a ridiculous amount so I can very clearly see what I'm doing. And then I sort of drag the hue across and see what all the different colors do to the photo and how it affects it. So there we have our yellows and oranges, and then we've got green, which turns into blue, and then the purples, pinks. I quite like the way the pink looks actually. But I think for this photo, I'm going to leave it here around the oranges. And once I'm happy with the hue, I bring down the saturation back to 0 and then bring it up ever so slightly. So I think there at about 8, it looks very good. And next, I also like to play with the highlights. So again, I'm going to bring up the saturation super high and then move the hue slider around. And you know, we can either do something creative, like I love having the highlights with this nice like light blue. I think is a very creative edit for a photo. And you can even go overboard, because I think personally it looks quite nice when the saturation is at that ridiculously high spectrum. But I don't know. I think for this I might leave it again back in the warmer tones. No, actually, you know what? I like it with the cyans. I think that looks amazing, so I'm gonna leave it there. Just at a low saturation rather than so high. Yeah, I think that looks good. So we'll have a look at a before and after. And once again, I feel like the tint is a little low. I find that when you start editing the tone in an image, the color starts to shift. And then when you shift the color, the tone starts to shift. So it's all about editing in small amounts, very gradually, and keeping an eye on what everything looks like as you're editing. So I'm going to bring up the exposure by 1 and then bring up the tint again a little bit. Depending what I'm editing and what the photo is and what it's for, I kind of like to have my personal work be a little bit cooler and more in the green side of things. But when I'm editing things for, say, clients or an editorial, I like my photos to be warmer and more in the pink side. So I think this is the final image. I'm so happy with the way that looks. Let's do another before and after. So this is the before. And this is the after. It's so funny once you've added all these little edits, which are fairly simple in Lightroom. When you look at the before, it almost looks like a black and white photo. And then you've got the after, which is just so saturated and it looks nice tonally. And yeah, it makes such a big difference to do all these little tweaks and edits to your photo just to bring it up to the next level and to make it, you know, stand out a little bit more than the original image. I think it's also important to note that I'm editing a raw photo, which helps me bring out all the original colors in the photo in a really nice and natural way. If this was a JPEG, it wouldn't look the same with these edits. I wouldn't have been able to push the white balance up so warm. I wouldn't have been able to save as many shadows. So yeah, there we have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this Lightroom tutorial. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys really soon. I can't wait to release my next set of vlogs and tutorials and behind the scenes films. I have so much content for you guys, so I can't wait for that. Bye!